Okay, so I'm having a bit of a drive around Gympie today, and just went past the Gympie Central Shopping Centre, and there was a guy wearing a t-shirt with the words Deus Ex Machina, which is, I think, a motorcycle brand or something. And to my understanding, that translates from Latin to something like the ghost in the machine, the spirit in the machine, saying that this machine is alive. It's not just a lump of metal, it's living, it's inspirited. And so that brings to mind the conversation that I've been wanting to have about the word spirit. And so let's talk about the spirit. I'm not talking about, well, let's not say what I'm not talking about, let's just say it. So here's a scenario. I want you to imagine that the word spirit, I think, has got lots of different sort of meanings or implications. What do people mean when they talk about spirit? So let's say, for example, that you go and poll 100 people about the word spirit, and I reckon that there would probably be, out of 100 people, average people, that there would probably be 10 different versions of what they mean when they speak about spirit. All right? And so let's see if we can just sort of talk about a few of those. Okay, so firstly, you've got the Christian sort of version, the Holy Spirit. So the idea is that the God creature actually exists in three different forms: God creature in the sky, the God creature on earth, the baby Jesus character, and the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit that sort of moves around and infests people. So it's kind of like, think of it as like a vapor, right? A vapor that's either there or not there. The Holy Spirit was with us, that means the vapor was there, and it's a vapor that can be inhaled by somebody and ingested into their body, into their cells. Okay, so the Holy Spirit was within you. Something like that, okay? Not big on the whole Christian mythology, don't think it really makes a lot of sense, don't think it's real. Okay, so let's think about some other versions of spirit. So another version of spirit is like the Japanese Shinto concept of kami. Kami doesn't translate directly into spirit, even though I don't even know what a definition of spirit is, or even if there is one. Okay, but the idea of kami in Shinto is the idea that there are these certain it's like a living force. I don't think it's a living being per se. It's an alivenment associated with landscapes, forests, particular trees, groves, and also gingers, which is their temples, and the tories themselves. The tories basically, the torii being the red arch, represents that what lies beyond has kami, or is kami. So so you'll have a red arch leading on a path to a beautiful waterfall or something. All right. The kami themselves. Now let's see. I don't know everything about this, so I've got as many questions as I've got sort of answers. But that's my understanding, is that these some places are said to have kami. Imagine that you've got two trees side by side, and one of them is just a magnificent, beautiful tree, and it's full of birds, and it's got berries, and it's got a beautiful aesthetic, and the other tree next to it's a bit gnarly and not really particularly exciting. One tree can be said to have kami, and the other maybe doesn't have kami, and so it's like an appeal, if you like. That's another way of saying, I think, that something is seen to have a life about it when it has certain qualities that make it appealing to people, biophilic people who love life. So then the other thing about spirit is sort of it's tied into this concept of soul. Again, Vita Sapien's not a big fan of the concept of soul being this subset of the human being that actually lives indefinitely, and that it basically wears the human being as its contemporary skin, and that when an individual dies, this soul thing departs the body and wanders off exactly. It kind of, again, it doesn't really make a lot of sense because, you know, if there is such a thing as a soul, I mean, where does it go? Where does it go to? Is there like a, you know, and if humans have got a soul, then has a dog got a soul? And if the dog's got a soul, then an earthworm's got to have a soul. And if there's 200 million, you know, earthworms per square, you know, 100 kilometers, then, you know, where does the souls of all the earthworms go? You know, and if, for example, the soul attaches itself to a newborn baby, right? Then if you've got a population of 8 billion people, and a proportion of them are dying every year, but a proportion have been born, there's actually more people being born than die right now. So where are these extra souls coming from? So maybe the soul is actually grown, is like an organ of the baby, right? But then what happens to the soul when the person dies? Then it's no longer got. It doesn't make any sense. You know what I'm saying? If you actually ask questions about these things, it doesn't make any sense. Okay, so let's try and make sense of these things, because people talk about spirit a lot. We talk about spirituality a lot, and there is something. I think that there is something compelling about the idea, and I think it's worthy concept, but it needs to be properly framed. You can't just throw these things around and go, okay, you've got to think them through. So in Vita Sapien, there are three, the term spirit is used in three different contexts. The somatic spirit. Okay, now the word somatic, I get that word from the concept of somatic energy. Somatic energy being energy that's generated within a body. Okay. So a somatic spirit, in this sense, is the spirit in the way that people talk about spirit, particularly in relation to when somebody is spirited. In fact, I think that the word spirit actually relates to breath. Okay, I think the origins of the word spirit are to do with breath. And so in Vita Sapien, the somatic spirit refers to the animating aspect of a human being who is alive. And they're breathing, and they're moving, and they're talking, and they're doing things. And when somebody is kind of flat, you say that they've lost their spirit. It hasn't gone away, it's just that animated spirit is not so animated. Okay? Alright, and then we got a concept called the exosomatic spirit. And the exosomatic spirit, okay, now in Vita Sapien Philosophy, when a person dies, the spirit dies with them. The spirit is a function of their being alive. If they're in a coma, they still have the spirit, although they're not very animated. But when they die, the spirit dies with them in Vita Sapien Philosophy. So then we have another concept called exosomatic spirit. Now, exosomatic spirit refers to that thing that people leave behind. Okay, so for example, Van Gogh's exosomatic spirit is very strong because his paintings show up in coffee table books and art galleries and all over the place. I mean, it's not hard. You know, try going a day walking about in a city centre without seeing a Van Gogh painting. All right, his exosomatic spirit, which is the representation of his life that is left behind. Okay, the exosomatic spirit of the guy that used to fix his shoes, Van Gogh's cobbler. All right, I don't know where that is. It might be gone forever. There might simply be no evidence of it, and maybe there is some of the cobbler's shoes somewhere in a museum, but it's not attributed to him. So by all intents and purposes, his exosomatic spirit has sort of collapsed. It's gone. So one of the aspirations for the Vita Sapien lifestyle would be that you would leave a strong exosomatic spirit, which is to say that you've lived with conviction and you've made people happy and you've given people memories, and these are exosomatic spirit. The memory of people, right? The memory of people. My father's exosomatic spirit lives within me, not lives within me, but it's present for me because I have good memories of him, and there's a few artifacts around the place that I own. In fact, I even have a box full of his ashes as an example of exosomatic spirit. Exosomatic spirit might be in a negative connotation, like, you know, Adolf Hitler has got a very strong exosomatic spirit, not a particularly great one in the big scheme of things. Okay, so that's exosomatic spirit. So we've got somatic spirit, which is the animating force of a human being or a living organism that dies when they die, and the exosomatic spirit is that which they leave behind them. All right, the third part of spirit is called parasomatic spirit. This is Vita Sapien Philosophy. And parasomatic spirit refers to, it's kind of a bit like kami in a way. Like a friend of mine had a concrete statue of a cat right next to his door. Whenever I would come to his house, I'd always have the sensation that I was being watched by a cat, where in reality I was just being faced with a piece of concrete in the shape of a cat. So parasomatic spirit is the idea that some objects, right, clouds for example, seem to project the sense of them actually being alive. Let's put it this way. Parasomatic spirit is the idea that some objects seem to have a somatic spirit. Way of putting it. Now, here's the thing. So, if a painter were to paint a landscape, all right, then the landscape seems to have a life, has a parasomatic spirit, and then the painter dies and the painting becomes his exosomatic spirit, the thing that he leaves behind. Okay, so the exosomatic spirit, which is the painting, can also have a parasomatic spirit, which is to say that you look at the painting and you can almost feel that little piece of acrylic actually has the life of a tree. Okay, now in those three forms, I think that Vita Sapien has captured the concept of spirit. It has done away with the concept of the eternal soul, so the spirit that lives on indefinitely after the body and that transfers from body to body. I just don't think that makes a lot of sense. But Vita Sapien's view of spirit, I think,